Welcome back out on the mushroom trail. It's February, another beautiful day out here. Feeling rather spring-like. Birds are singing and forest is alive. So we'll set out, we'll see what we see. Hopefully we'll see some familiar friends as well as maybe perhaps some mysteries along the way. So thanks for coming along and we'll see what we see. We're here just off the trail. I see an old fruiting body here that's a common sight in the forests of the Pacific Northwest. This is a really common one. It's old, might be difficult to recognize in this state. It's a little discolored. Obviously, it's been out here for a good several months, if not over a year. This is the Dyer's Polypore, Phaeolus schweinitzii. So this is a very common mushroom that's revered or sought after by a lot of people who dye natural fabrics. So you can get quite a range of colors from this one. And kind of unique, this is one that, you know, oftentimes when I see it young, it's velvety on top and has kind of a yellowish orange to brown color. Definitely one that, you know, I'm oftentimes excited to see, but also very sad to see, because, you know, I'll often see this at the base of an old growth Doug fir, and it's a sure sign that that Doug fir is on its way out. So you can see this one is growing on an old kind of stump that's been sawed up or chopped up here. So that will happen. It'll grow from the actual dead wood, but also you'll see it growing at the base of big old trees oftentimes. And that's kind of the harbinger of death, right? So there's a lot of different theories on whether it parasitizes it and contributes to its death or whether it's just more symptomatic of it. But anyways, good one to keep an eye out for. I'll keep an eye out for a slightly fresher one to give you a better idea of what this looks like when it's not quite so old, but interesting to see. I was just running up the trail here and a little flash of white on this log off to the left here caught my eye, so I figured I'd stop to investigate. Initially I thought that it may actually be a cat's tongue or a tooth jelly fungus, maybe a really small new fruiting body coming up, but upon closer examination, here's what I found. Isn't that amazing? I believe that what we're looking at here is known as Phycomyces blakesleeanus. Really fascinating species. So this one has actually been studied extensively in lab environments and is incredibly responsive to different stimuli. So I know that there's still quite a bit of research being conducted on this and that a lot has been learned and probably a lot more will continue to be learned from this one. Now, this one has a really funny origin story that I had actually not heard until very recently. Shout out to Aaron Hilliard at Mushroom Wonderland. Love what you're doing out there on the channel. Doing an awesome job. Heard this story from you and really made me laugh. Definitely not one that I'll forget. So as Aaron tells it, there were two famous mycologists. One of them, his last name was Blakesley. And the mycologist who actually discovered this one was not Blakesley, but it was actually another mycologist who was not a fan of Blakesley at all. So he actually opted to name this mushroom or this fungal specimen here after the mycologist that he didn't like, which seems quite strange upon first glance, but starts to make sense when you think about the substrate on which this one grows. So whenever you're walking the trails in the park next time and you see perhaps a dog dropping or some horse manure or other forms of feces, you may want to take a close look and you might actually discover this one because that's exactly what this grows on. So this is actually a mushroom that grows from feces, so hard to imagine that something this beautiful at the base of this is likely some rodent feces, maybe some squirrel turds or something of the like. This is probably a rodent latrine. So super interesting, pretty hilarious. So in naming this Phycomyces blakesleeanus, essentially this mycologist was naming every turd across the country and maybe around the world after this guy that he did not have a particular passion for. So I think that's pretty funny. Coming down the trail here, another quick example of one that I highlighted in the last video. This is the Rosy Conk, Rhodofomes cajanderi. And this one's kind of interesting because, you know, I alluded to last time the idea that this one can have guttation on it. So this is a really good example of that. These are essentially the metabolites, right? Sort of like the sweat of a mushroom. And I always love seeing the, you know, you get all kinds of different colors showing up in there. And a lot of these conchs are these different bracket fungi. Not this one in particular, but the ones that are medicinal, I've heard referenced by the likes of Paul Stamets and others, that it's very possible that there's a lot of interesting medicinal compounds contained within the guttation of other mushrooms, like the red belted conk or other medicinal ones. So an interesting area where there's still so much to learn. So cool thing that I just figured I'd swing over, take a quick breather from my run and highlight that. So very interesting, beautiful to look at, fun to see. Just taking a quick second to appreciate more of this beautiful Rosy Conk that we're looking at here. And I wanted to mention one additional thing. So although this one isn't that well studied, it is believed that this may have potential medicinal properties. So there are some folks, there's actually a pair of folks out at Bastyr University who did some independent research on this to try to see if it had properties that may indicate that it has medicinal capabilities. And I believe that what they found is that they thought that it may be good in fighting leukemia of some sort. So definitely one of those ones. There remains a lot of research to be conducted. So I don't think this one has been really well studied. It's kind of a lesser known medicinal. So, and it's not one that I personally have used or consumed, but it's an interesting one nonetheless. And who knows, maybe these metabolites that we're seeing in this guttation contain some powerful medicinal compounds that'll make the news in the future. So fun to look at, just a real beauty. So I feel like I could stare at this all day, but I'll pack it up and get back out on the trail. Spotted this guy growing out of this, I believe it's a old Doug fir snag. This is one of my absolute favorites to see, especially late winter when most of the other mushrooms have packed it up, called it good for the year. This is always a joy to come across. Tooth jelly fungus, Latin name is Pseudohydnum gelatinosum. Pseudohydnum because the hydnum species, right, the hedgehog mushrooms, they have similar teeth. But this is a false hedgehog, so that's kind of the translation of that Latin name. Not a whole lot out here in the way of edible mushrooms this time of year, so just for fun, I'm gonna harvest a few of these, throw them in my pocket, and take them home and see if I can get a good candied gummy out of the deal. So I'll kind of keep you posted on that, and we'll see if I have any luck getting a good result. But fun to see, keep your eyes peeled, even though we're late in the season, there's always something. Up here on the side of the trail, I see a common sight that's oftentimes associated with springtime here in the Pacific Northwest and other places. These are very small, but provide a nice flash of color to the forest floor. Growing out of this little twig, this is the Alpine jelly cone, which also goes by several other common names. So like the jelly cup, poor man's gumdrop. This is, oh boy, what is it? I think it's Guepiniopsis alpina. I might be messing that up, but I believe that that's the Latin name for this one. So anyways, as you can see, very small, jelly fungus that's just kind of growing out of this stick. This one has the very characteristic shape of a gumdrop. And sometimes people will munch on these as a trailside snack if they're young and fresh. Not a lot there, so you're not working with a lot. Also not a lot of flavor, but some people like them. So interesting one to see. And again, it's been unseasonably warm out here. So, you know, just within the last week, it's been 62 degrees, which is crazy. So even though we're here in February, today it's probably in the 50s. So usually I don't associate this with this time of year, but this isn't a typical year. So these guys are out. And just over here on the side of this beautiful trail, I kind of pulled over for a quick second to poke around. Just looked like a really nice spot for mushrooms to grow. And wouldn't you know it, lo and behold, here we are. Check this out. Super excited to be seeing this. This is not something that I typically see very often out here. Very woodier looking mushroom. You can see that there's a really skinny stipe down here. Let me just get it in there. A little sticky or gelatinous. There's another smaller fruiting body right up here. Let me see if I can find it. There we go. And then another one that I see just a little further down this log right here. So this is very, very cool. Again, not something that I typically see. I don't know if that's because it's rare and you don't see it very often for that reason, or if it's just easily overlooked. That may well be the case. But I believe that what we're looking at is Plectania. It's possible that it's Pseudoplectania. There's a couple species that are pretty similar. So I'm not 100% sure on this, but I'm guessing that it's Plectania milleri. Just growing out of this old decaying fallen log here. So definitely a beautiful sight to see. I've got a little bit more research to do on this for sure, but this is awesome to see. Couldn't be more excited, and definitely is going to get me back home poring over field guides and kind of polishing my skill set, sharpening my knowledge, because like I said, this is one that I think it could be out here more often than I think, but maybe it just blends in or is easy to miss. So let me know if you've seen this one or if you know exactly what species this is. Again, I'm thinking Plectania milleri, but it could be another Plectania species or also Pseudoplectania. I think there's one Pseudoplectania nigrella, which is a possibility as well. So let me know in the comments if you've got any knowledge on this. I'd be really curious to learn from you and know what your opinion or your take is on this, because again, not one that I typically see. Super thrilled. Isn't that cool? So I just can't stop looking at these guys, and I am continuing to investigate these a little more closely. What I'm interested in is trying to determine A, if there's much of a stipe or a stem. I'm also looking at it and trying to determine whether or not it's tomentose, right? Whether or not there's little hairs on the backside of the cup. Now this is a little bit slimy or wet, I believe just probably from rainfall. Sort of drying out a little bit as I peel it. And I think that it is slightly furry. It's funny because when I see a mushroom like this that I don't see that often, that I know I'm not gonna consume, I'm so hesitant to pick it for whatever reason. Just rather admire it in its natural habitat here, learn what I can. But here you can see, actually, as I peel back that moss, a pretty pronounced stipe. So that's very interesting, and definitely a little kind of velvety or furry, very slight. See if we can get close enough to actually see any small hairs on there. Boy, it's a tough call. Super interesting, very intriguing. I'll definitely be back to this log to investigate more closely in the future here. So cool and see. So it's decided, I think I am going to just harvest this little guy, I figure I've got to learn more about this and just kind of positively ID this. So I'm just going to take a small little sample of this guy. And let's see here. Let's see underneath what we're looking at here. Give me a second. Put the knife away here. All right. So let's take a look. Here's what we've got. Very interesting. You can see that flesh, even though the outside is white, it's kind of like black, it's kind of a white off gray inside. I'm gonna definitely bag this and take it back, do a little more research back on the home front, see what I can figure out about this one. So super interesting to see. Always carry, when I'm out for a run, I carry a little running pack. I've got a little bag in there. So go ahead and take this back, look at it under closer scrutiny back at home. But yeah, it does look, there's probably some fine hairs on there. Definitely small stipe, not super pronounced, but definitely there. So very interesting. We'll see what we learn. Fun stuff. Kind of funny, I went to put that mushroom in the bag that's in my running pack, and wouldn't you know it, old dried out Pacific golden chanterelle. So I guess I'm not always good about remembering to check my own bag. Looks like this one may return to the forest here. Here we get another look at beautiful guttation. This time coming from Fomitopsis mouncea, the red belted conk. And oftentimes when I'm in the forest and I see this one, because I know this species really well and I know that it's medicinal, I'm familiar with using it, I'll oftentimes actually lick the guttation off of this mushroom. It has a sweet citrusy taste, and it's something that I've grown accustomed to really kind of enjoying. So I'm gonna quench my running thirst here with a little guttation, but figured I'd just kind of point that out to y'all. So kind of fun to see. There's always something out here. Yet another beautiful example of guttation on Fomitopsis mouncea, the red belted conk. This one is so prone to have abundant guttation that sometimes people will use this as a sort of field marker to identify this one, especially in these young stages at different times of year. So doesn't that look tasty? Up here on the side of the trail, we see one that we referenced in the last video. This is one of our witch's butter species, specifically Coniferous witch's butter. Obviously quite old. We can see it's seen better days. It's kind of melting into this log. But when we look up here, this is what caught my eye in particular. This is fascinating to me. You can see the discoloration. This is turning into something looks like entirely different. So this is like transforming from an orange fruiting body to a white gelatinous fruiting body. Not quite sure. I mean, this may be just the natural process of this thing aging. Quite possible. But it also could be the process of being parasitized by another fungus. So sorry, I'm getting distracted by those spiders on the left-hand side. Fun to look at. Oh man, I love zooming in to the things that exist on this micro level. Always a joy. If you know what we're observing here, let me know in the comments. I'd be super curious. Would love to gain some insight into, whether this is part of the natural decay process that's going on, or if this is being parasitized, or any other insight that you can offer. So if you got knowledge on this, don't be shy. I just popped in to check up on a really abundant candy cap patch that I'd come across earlier in the season. I actually posted a really short video featuring that one, and I was kind of curious to see if it's still churning out any mushrooms, but to no avail. It looks like it has kind of run its course here for the year. So you never know. It's kind of a cold weather mushroom. So perhaps if temperatures cool back down, maybe we'll get another flush, but I kind of doubt it. I think that they're probably done for the year out here in Western Washington, but you never know. We'll keep our eyes open. See what we see. Looks like the perfect perch for an owl or a hawk or something. Looks like it's straight out of a fairy tale or something, that little perch. Let's actually see. Oh yeah, look at that. Not only does it look like the perfect little fairy tale perch for an owl, but it looks like we've got an owl pellet underneath. So looks like exactly what it's been used for. Always cool to see what little details we can observe out here in nature. Check this mushroom out. I actually just gave it a little tap and it fell right off this old dug fir log. Really cool one though. This has kind of got that stacked pancake look. This is Ganoderma brown eye. Very interesting mushroom. This is related to the artist conch. This is an old one. It's got some heft to it, but you can see that inside it's been colonized and it's hollow, kind of in the process of decaying, but very cool feature. And this can sometimes be somewhat confusing or tough to identify. Sometimes people will mistake these with something like a garricon just because they've got that stacked kind of pancake look. So really unique one, kind of fun to see. So Ganoderma applinatum is the artist conch, and this is basically very similar to that. It's a variation, a growth form that is a little bit different, but fun to see out here. So very cool. As I move through the forest and come up to this old dug fir log, one of the things that I notice is a little shelf fungus that could potentially be confused with turkey tail. So in the last video, last week, we looked at false turkey tail, the Sterium genus. This one looks a little different than that. But you can see how, even though it may be a little bit of a stretch, you could say, well, you know, you've got some banded colors. Looking down at these ones, you get more variety. These guys are they've got a little age on them, so they're a little weathered, so they might not always look exactly the same. But what I'm picking up on the edges is a little hint of violet or purple. If we turn this over, my suspicion is that we may encounter some teeth or tooth-like structures. Let's zoom in here and see what we've got. Yeah, so you can see this underside surface, very different than the turkey tail, which was white with small pores. This one has kind of a rough appearance as well, and it almost looks like it's toothed. This is what's commonly referred to as the violet-toothed Polypore. You can see a little bit of that color remaining too at different stages of growth. It'll have different degrees of that violet hue, but definitely an interesting one. A good, you know, you could classify this as a turkey tail look-alike. So a good one to know. And again, in its younger age and its youth, it'll be more violet up top as well. So violet-toothed Polypore trichaptum, and definitely a good one to be familiar with, relatively common around the country, and oftentimes questions emerge about whether or not people may have stumbled across turkey tail. Notice too, real quick, you'll see how there's a little bit of algae on that down there. That's something that tends to happen with these guys as well. So, and again, growing off of coniferous wood, this case dug fir. So in these great clusters like this. So cool one to see, good one to know, good one to not confuse with turkey tail, and hopefully that's helpful. Just admiring a little bit more of this violet-toothed Polypore, and check out these mosses. So cool. Love shrinking down and zooming in on all this magical stuff. It's going on all the time right out here in this forest. fun to admire. And just kind of poking around out here, came across this. Looks like a definite den. I know that there's a lot of coyotes out here. Kind of cool to come across. Don't want to disturb anything, but fun to see. And check this out. Absolutely thrilled to see this. I was just kind of walking across these downed logs here as I'm exploring. And currently I'm walking on a Doug fir snag. And I noticed these little growths coming out of it. And lo and behold, here we are with, again, a mushroom that we featured last week. Slightly different growth form last week because it was growing off of the root of a hemlock. This instead is growing from Douglas fir, and we can kind of infer that this log or this standing snag came down over the course of the last few months. So we've got a West Coast reishi, Ganoderma organense, growing out of that, and we can tell that the tree was positioned differently when it first started to grow. And we see this little alien arm coming up here. This is actually the underside here, and this thing is still pretty firm to the touch, but it is in the process of decay for sure. So, and as I inspect a little more closely, I can see kind of similar little growths coming off of here. So it's interesting to see. Those are also old kind of reishi fruiting bodies. So always love coming across these. And even though this is way past the time where I could harvest this and do anything with it, it's still very cool to see. And it points me in the right direction for, you know, next season come late summer, early fall. It's cool to have one more place to check, especially knowing that this is growing on Douglas fir, which again, I rarely see, usually always on hemlock. So cool to see, and always learning. Gives me one more place to poke around in the years to come, look for reishi. And all over on the side of the trail up here, I'm seeing a really cool little mushroom. It grows from small twigs and leaf litter and debris. Different species of this type of mushroom will favor different habitats. This is the bird's nest fungus. This specific one, Nigrella candida. So you'll notice this woolly little cup. And inside of the actual nest, which you can see obviously where it gets its name, you see in there small little eggs. These are called peridioles, which are the actual spore packets for this mushroom. Now these ones actually depend on raindrops to come in, splash inside the cup, and eject these little peridioles out into the world. So a lot of times I'll notice little colonies of these because more often than not, these peridioles don't get splashed too far from the nest. So they'll kind of, sometimes you'll see them on the exact twig that they were originally formed on. You know, you'll see the peridioles resting there. Other times you'll see them on neighboring leaf litter and debris. So they never tend to get too far. So you often get these dense little colonies of these. One of my favorites, a really cool little mushroom to see. When they're young, they do have a protective little cap. And the peridioles are originally in a gel-like matrix. So they develop, and there's all different kinds. Some of them actually have little tendrils or strings that keep them attached to or anchored to their original spot. So they'll sometimes hang in the air and distribute spores that way. This particular species does not have that tendril, so the peridioles are splashed where they will end up going as far as they can from a single drop of rain. So cool one to see. Keep an eye out for it, pretty common. And like I said, all different species are out there. So I'm sure that this is one that you'll see if you slow down and look closely enough. Up here on the side of the trail, another good example of Nigrella candida. Bird's nest fungus, full of eggs, right? And we can see a little bit of that matrix down there at the bottom, that kind of gel. There's a little bit left. Let's see if the one in the back there, can't tell. Oh yeah, I think they are all opened up. but still some eggs to be had, so just waiting on some more rain to splash those about. I'm sure it's just a matter of, shoot, probably hours until that happens. More bird's nest fungi up on the side of the trail, and we can see these are varying ages. So we can see this one that's a little darker in color, obviously a little older. We can see an old, or actually a newer perennial splashed on the side of that. It's clinging to that old cup. We see fruiting bodies all down this log, and again, varying ages. We can see these ones packed full of perennials, those little eggs waiting on the rain. So kind of neat. And looking down even further, we see even more. So like I said, you'll oftentimes find really dense colonies or clusters of these. These are a relatively big bird's nest fungus, Nigella candida, and that of course is on a relative basis. A similar one, Nigella tomentosis, is a little bit smaller in size, but also has that woolly look to it. So always fun to see. And bird's nest fungus abound. They are just everywhere in here. And even if we look up here, this is a cedar. So we're currently at the base of a cedar, and we see this little offshoot, and lo and behold, more bird's nests, also full of eggs. So really thriving out here. Fun to see. Another beautiful, full, very full bird's nest here, chock full of perennials. Notice how, you know, a couple of these are splashed out on the side of this cup, and then if you look at that needle back there, you can see one very small perennial clinging to that. It's about how far they get. Every now and then I'll see them stuck or clinging to debris or leaves that are actually above it. So I think that depending on how hard this rain is, oh, here's another one over here. And I see one down there. So you start to look around and you can see these successful perennials that have splashed out to different places. They can really get some air depending on how hard the rain is and the angle that these drops hit at. So very fascinating little mushroom. Another beautiful troop of bird's nest fungi here, Nigella candida. And notice these perennials splashed about the cup, but then also if we look at neighboring areas, like this piece of bark, we see one up there. We see some on the neighboring fern. So these were actually propelled or shot upwards from the nest, which is really quite incredible. And even down here, we see them pretty far away from the actual nest themselves, out here on these leaves and ferns. So these perennials having a lot of success getting spread about locally in the vicinity of their home nest. So very cool, so much fun. Can't help but stop to admire these. Was running up the trail and this caught my eye. Had to stop just to point this out. Here again, we've got Sterium, the false turkey tail, and then literally inches away, we've got true turkey tail growing in abundance out of this nearby log. So cool to see. It's amazing how closely these guys can grow together. Just a quick recap, if this is the one you're looking for, white poured surface underneath, whereas this guy, buff orange surface. So I know we talked a lot about that last video, so I won't bore you with repeating that in too much detail, but had to point it out because I know that's something that a lot of people are searching for out in the woods. So good luck. Well, that about concludes our first February mushroom run / stroll. Thank you all for joining me out here on the mushroom trail. Always a pleasure. So glad that we were able to encounter several old friends, you know, the mushrooms that we know so well, but also to come across a few mysteries, the ones that we don't know quite as well. So love the idea of going home, poring over some field guides, continuing to learn. There's no shortage of mysteries out here, that's for sure. So thanks for coming along, really appreciate it. And thank you all so much, those of you that watched the last video. And boy, it was such a joy reading through those comments, and that provides great motivational fuel to get me to continue to come out here, pull out the camera, and see what I can do to get some great content out your way. So thank you all so much. Appreciate you tuning in. And until next time, happy trails.